Here we have the Chapter 10 quiz. The first question is, in response to an increase in demand, a monopoly firm would probably blank price and blank quantity. Well, like for many questions, we should answer this by drawing the graphs. So now it's getting a little bit complicated because we have a lot of curves, but well, let's draw them. So first we have demand, and then marginal revenue. And marginal revenue is easy to draw because it has a twice as steep slope. Then we have costs. We have marginal cost and average total cost. All right, so let's determine what happens here, and then we'll look at an increase in demand. So first, we find quantity based on where MR equals MC, and then price by going up to the demand curve. So let's call this P dot and Q dot. Now what happens? Demand increases. We have this new demand curve, D prime, and associated with that new demand curve is going to be a new marginal revenue curve, right? So the marginal revenue curve also increases. So what is the new profit maximizing quantity? Well, it's where marginal revenue equals marginal cost here. So we have Q dot dot. And then what price will they charge? P dot dot. And so if this is the usual case, then we can say what probably will happen. It will increase price and increase quantity. Okay, question 2 is, the profit maximizing price is what? So looking at this graph, we do the same thing we did above. First, find the profit maximizing quantity, where MR equals MC. That happens here at point L. So we're supposed to produce quantity R. And then what price can we charge if we're producing quantity R? Go up until we hit the demand curve. That happens at point F and go over. So we charge price N, we produce QR. So the answer is N. Question 3. The profit maximizing monopolies firm's cost per unit at its profit maximizing quantity is, let us examine this. Marginal revenue equals marginal cost here. And the question asks, what's its cost per unit? Well, that's another word for what? Average total cost. So this profit maximizing point tells the firm to produce 220 units. And then what's the cost per unit when it's producing 220? It'll go up until you hit the average total cost curve. That happens here. Go over, and you find that the answer is 16. So here the answer is 6. Here the answer is 16. 4. A feature of monopoly that leads to unfavorable consequences is that does it reduce income inequality? No. Does it set marginal cost equal to marginal revenue? Yes. And so this seems like the right answer, but let's check the other ones. Produces more output than a perfectly competitive firm? No. Produces less output. Charges a lower price than a perfectly competitive firm? No, it charges a higher price. So only B is true. And why is that a problem, that marginal revenue equals marginal cost rather than price? Well, it's not really worded very well here, frankly. The problem, because both monopoly and competitive firms decide quantity based on where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. The problem really is that they set price equal to what people are willing to pay. And that's the problem, because a competitive firm, the price turns out to equal marginal cost. So no one's setting the price in a perfectly competitive firm. So if the monopolist was to set price equal to marginal cost, then it would be efficient. It would maximize total surplus. Well, because it doesn't, it's inefficient. Question 5. If a monopoly firm produces where price equals marginal cost, it could blank profits by producing blank and blank its price. Keep in mind, the monopoly is setting its price. So this is a little bit misleading maybe, because remember we have the following. Demand, marginal revenue, and then we have marginal cost and average total cost. And so this is what we have. We don't have the price here, as we would if this were a perfectly competitive firm. But if the price equals the marginal cost, then you could raise it, right? You could always raise it to the demand curve, to what people are willing to pay. So you would never want to produce where you never want to set a price that equals marginal cost if you want to maximize profits. You would if you want to maximize social efficiency, but most monopolists are interested in profits, not social welfare, right? So if this is true, then you could raise your price. So raising its price. In some sense, you only have to look to which has the raising here. It would be these two options. You're going to produce less, but what would happen to your profits? Would they rise or fall? If you raised your price and produced less, they would rise. So only A is the right answer. Question 6. When the firm is maximizing its economic profit, its total revenue is the area of the rectangle. So we're trying to find total revenue. And this is a very messy curve. But you have to zero in on MRMC. So they intersect here. Then the firm should produce a quantity J and sell it at a price of P, because this is the maximum consumers are willing to pay for quantity of J. And so it's selling J units of the good, it's charging P for each unit, and this black rectangle is total revenue. So what's the area of this? 0, P, D, J. You go from 0 to P to D to J. Question 7. In order to obtain maximum profits, the monopoly should produce the output determined by point. Well, again, find MR equals MC. Right here. This is point G. Question 8. An increase in the marginal costs of a monopoly would blank price and blank quantity. Well, we can answer this in the same way that we answered question 1. In other words, draw the graph and then draw the curves shifting. Demand, marginal revenue, marginal cost. I'm going to leave out average cost because we don't need to know at this point whether it's profitable or not. So what would happen if the marginal cost increased? Well, that would mean we go from MC to MC prime. Let us back up. When we have curve MC, where do we produce? Well, we produce the quantity where MR equals MC. We produce this quantity, and we charge this price. But when the curve shifts up, we produce where MR equals MC. So we produce Q prime, and we charge price P prime. So quantity goes down, price goes up. So here we have the marginal cost. This would blank price, so we want to say increase price. So it's either this one or this one. But we also want to say decrease quantity, so it's only this one. So B is the right answer. Question 9 is a conceptual question. If you are the only seller of gasoline in a small town or community, your monopoly would result from probably not sunk costs, right? Because you could sell your gas station to someone else and recover your costs. They're not sunk, at least not most of them. What about government restrictions? Well, the government's not saying, unless the government's saying you're the only seller, but it doesn't sound like that this is what the government's doing here. It's not like they have a patent or any other government regulation that's benefiting it. What about economies of scale? There's no reason to believe that gas stations are subject to economies of scale where costs fall as output increases. So, location. And then last question is, in the blank range of demand, total revenue blank with an increase in quantity. This this is just a typo here. You can just ignore this part here. Just repeating the question again. Well, if you remember that the demand curve has the following property. So this is a demand curve. In the middle, it's unit elastic. In this part, it's inelastic. And here, it's elastic. So price goes from P to P prime. And what happened to total revenue? So if we're in the inelastic, oh wait, let me come back to that. So we decreased our quantity, we increased our price. This is inelastic. What happened to total revenue? Price went up by some percent. Quantity fell by what? A smaller or larger percent? Smaller, because it's inelastic. So therefore, what happened to revenue? It increased. We increased our price a lot, but we didn't lose that many customers. So total revenue increased. Now, this is saying it just in reverse. Total revenue blank with an increase in quantity. So now if we go the other way, we increase quantity. What happens is we lower the price, right? The price has to fall. So we lower the price, and do we get a lot more customers? No, because it's inelastic. So our total revenue falls. So in the inelastic range of demand, total revenue falls. So this is not true. And this is the only one that's inelastic. Okay, what about elastic? Well, we know it's not going to be does not change, right? Because the only one that does not change is unit elastic. In fact, that's the right answer, is D. But let's go through why A is not the right answer. In the elastic range, total revenue blank with an increase in quantity. So now we're up here. And we're going from Q2 to Q3. And it's elastic. So our price goes from P2 to P3. So if it's elastic and we decrease our price by some percent, we get more customers. Do we get a lot more customers? Yes, it's elastic. And so our total revenue increases. But here it says decreases, that's why it's wrong.